Today, we're going to talk about some declarative features of Salesforce. After studying this topic, you should be able to identify the major capabilities of workflow rules and approval processes. We're going to cover Process Builder and flows in separate videos. This video will focus on workflow rules and approval processes. Now, this video is not meant to give you a working knowledge of every tool, but to help you understand when a declarative process could be used instead of writing code. So there are 4 main automation tools available, each with a different set of capabilities and ways to launch them. Now, as you'll see, there is a lot of overlap between the capabilities, which sometimes makes it challenging to decide which tool should be used, or if you should even use declarative processes at all. Let's start with an overview of the 4 process automation tools, and then we'll take a closer look at each specific tool and how it can be used. Let's start with workflows. Workflows are one of the earliest automation tools Salesforce created, and they're no longer widely used, but you may still come across them, especially if you have an older org. One of the main use cases for workflows today is to send outbound messages without having to write code. Now, workflows are triggered by making a simple if-then decision that's made after a record is created or updated. Then we have approvals. This type of automation is a bit different from workflows, processes, or flows because approvals could have many steps in the process, some of which require manual intervention, and some of which can happen automatically. They're similar to workflows because both approval processes and workflows are triggered off a simple if-then statement. But while workflows are automatically triggered by a record change, approval processes could be triggered directly by the user clicking a button or by another process initiating the approval process. Also, one important note about approval processes is that they do not have a time delay option. Approvals only run immediately. Other workflow options have time delayed capability. Now, all 4 automation processes can send automated emails. And automated emails come in 2 flavors. One type is called an email alert, which we'll show you in a little more detail. And this is an action that's defined through setup and requires the creation of an email template and an email alert. Workflows, approval processes, and process builders can only send email alerts. They cannot send custom messages that are not defined through email alerts. The other kind of email is just a straight custom email. Now, flows can send a custom email message that is not defined as an email alert. Flows can also use email alerts. Now, since email alerts are used in various automation processes, let's look at how email alerts are set up first. Okay, so let's talk about email templates. In email templates, there are 2 kinds. You'll notice that when you go to setup and you type email templates, you will see classic email templates and you will see lightning email templates. Classic email templates, as you would imagine, are the original email templates. And in fact, when you get a new org, you get a lot of email templates included for you that you don't even have to prepare. One common mistake that can be made is that you forget to make the template available for use, and then you wonder why you can't see it when you're setting up email alerts. We need to make sure that checkbox is checked. When you create a new template, you have the option of using text or HTML or even Visualforce, and we're just going to use text for simplicity. And you'll notice as you type the content of the email body, you can insert fields from different objects to include in the template. So for example, if I wanted to include contact fields, I would select a contact field. And then I get this copy pasted value here that I can paste directly into my email body. So let's look at a template that we've already set up. Here we have one called Classic Opportunity Amount Over 100,000. And you'll see that our checkbox for available for use is checked. And here we have an email body and we have some merge fields defined here. And if we wanted to add more, we have our little widget up here that lets us select additional fields. Now, in this case, this template is meant to be used with opportunities. So we would select opportunity fields, and we have now all our available fields available. Now, remember, just like everything else in Salesforce, email templates respect field level security. So make sure any users using this template have access to all the needed fields. Now, we also have Lightning email templates. Now, when you go into setup and you go to Lightning email templates, you only see one option. And that's kind of strange because you wonder, well, where's all the email templates? Furthermore, if you're an administrator, you don't automatically see all the correct privileges on the system administrator profile in order to use Lightning email templates. Even administrators need additional permission sets to use them. For example, one of the permissions you need is to access drag and drop content builder. And you'll notice here is a system administrator profile, and that checkbox is not checked. Also not checked is if we look for Lightning email, you'll notice the checkbox for email templates is not automatically checked. And so in order to use the Lightning email template builder, you actually need to create a new permission set or clone a profile and assign these system permissions. You would want to assign access drag and drop content builder. And you also want to assign create folders for Lightning email templates, edit HTML templates, and manage public Lightning email templates. And this allows your users to use the drag and drop builder. So what does that look like? It's actually not in setup. It is in normal Salesforce, and on the waffle, you would type email templates, and here they are right here. And now we can create a new email template. And we first give it a name, so we can say sample, for example. And if we want to use merge fields, we would specify what related entity we want to use. In this case, let's say contact. We don't have to provide a description. Now, this is important. If this template is just for you, you want to put it in your private email templates folder. But if you're setting this up for your org to use, make sure you change this folder. Otherwise, our users won't be able to see it, and you won't be able to see it when you're setting up email actions. So we select the folder and we go to public email templates, and we can put the template there. And we always have to have a subject line, content sample, and we're not going to worry about enhanced letterhead. And because I gave myself that drag and drop builder permission, I have this option. I have this little informational box here that says, hey, you can use the email template builder. But I can't do it from here. I have to click save first. And now I have the email template, and I can enter the message content in one of two ways. I can do it directly by entering HTML values here, clicking the pencil icon. If you want your users to use Lightning templates, you really want to give them access to the builder capability. So let's edit this template in Builder. And when we edit it in Builder, you see that we have all sorts of drag and drop options. So we could put rich text on the page. And from here, we can insert sample text. We say hello, and then we're going to insert a merge field. And again, remember, we're on the contact record. And so we have the recipient's information off the contact or lead record. We could also insert sender information or organization information. So let's use the recipient, and we're going to insert their first name into the email. And also notice the merge field format is different than how it looks in classic templates. Here we see a triple curly brace, where in classic templates, if we go back to classic templates and we look at one of our templates here, we have a curly brace with an exclamation mark to mark the merge field. So important little nuances there. We click save, and then we can exit out of the builder. And now we have an email template available for our use. And what makes it available is that we have put it into the public email templates folder. So now that we have an email template, we need to actually set up an email alert. Remember, a template is just a starting point, but in order to actually send an email, we have to create an alert. So we go to Workflow Actions and Email Alerts. And here we have some sample alerts. So let's look at one of them. We have one called Amount Over 100,000, and we'll click Edit on it. And you'll see a couple of things. We create our email alert, and we specify what email template we want to use. And when we search for our templates, we have two options available. We can look for classic templates, or we can look for Lightning templates. And again, only templates in public folders will be available here. So if you don't see the template you need, make sure it's in a public folder. And in this case, we already had a template specified, so no reason to specify anything different. And then we specify our recipients. So we can look for users, we can look for groups, and we could even enter additional emails to send the alert to. And then, now that we have an email alert set up, let's see how we can use it in a workflow. Now, the workflow rule is the simplest automation tools, and it only supports 4 actions: email alerts, which I just showed you how to do, field updates, which I'll show you in a moment, task creation, and sending outbound messages. Now, again, today, the most common use for using a workflow rule is to send outbound messages, because these 3 other tasks are set up much more easily in Process Builder and Flow, and also allow for much greater capability and flexibility. But outbound messages still remains a valid use case for workflow rule. So let's look at what workflow rules look like. To go to the workflow section, we'll type workflow in our quick find and setup, and you'll notice that we have workflow actions and workflow rules. So what's the difference? Workflow actions are the things that you can do in a workflow rule. You can't have a rule without an action because it doesn't do anything. So we already looked at email alerts. And we also have something called field updates. Now, again, if you are automating something new, you would not want to use workflow for this. Process Builder and Flow can do this much more efficiently, and you can do a lot more with much fewer steps. But in the wild, if you have an older org, it's very possible that you still have field updates floating around. So let's take a look at what a field update looks like. Here we have the name of our field update and a description. And then we have some options to what we're going to do. Now, in this particular case, we are going to update the opportunity name on an opportunity. And what we're going to do is we're going to prefix the account name in front of the opportunity name. Now, this field update is the definition of an action, but this in itself does not make anything happen. To make something happen, we have to invoke this field update as part of a workflow rule. But again, in modern orgs, this is not how you would do a field update. You would use Process Builder or Flow for this. But again, if you might see this in other orgs, so it's available in field updates. Outbound messages, this is still a valid use case. And what outbound messages does is it sends a message in a very specific format to a SOAP endpoint. And what we can do is we can send fields that we select, and they're going to be in a format that is predefined by Salesforce. So this is only useful if your endpoint is able to accept this outbound message in an XML format that it expects. And if it does, though, this is a declarative way to do it, and you don't have to get a programmer involved. And then creating tasks, and we have some send actions. So what does a workflow rule do? How do you create a workflow rule? Now that we have these actions, how do you actually make a rule work? So here we have a rule called enforce naming convention. Let's take a look at that. So we add a description, and in this case, this rule only fires under specific circumstances. It can fire in one of 3 circumstances. It can fire every time a record is created, but not on edits. It can fire on every single edit, or it can fire when created and if a record changes in such a way that the criteria are met, but the criteria wasn't met previously. And in this case, we're going to select created and anytime it meets criteria. And we see that the rule here is that the account name or the name of the opportunity does not include the account name. And as always, we'll check our syntax, make sure the formula is good. And in this case, we're going to fire when the formula below evaluates to true. And we're going to save our workflow rule. Now, again, this is just a rule. This is the if part of the rule. This says, if this action happens, I want you to do other things, but we haven't told it anything that we're going to do yet. And where do we do that? We put that under workflow actions. And here we'll click edit, and we can add actions. So we have one action. We have a field update that we just showed you to standardize the opportunity name. And we can add additional workflow actions, such as sending an outbound message, and a different kind of field update, or creating a task or an email alert. We can also send time-dependent actions. So for example, maybe after a record changes, we want to do something 20 days later. And so for time-dependent actions, we also have that option. So we have our rule now. We click done. The rule still is not going to necessarily fire right away. We still have to click the activate button or click edit and check the active box. So let's activate the rule now. And now when an opportunity is created or edited and doesn't have the account name as part of the name, the workflow rule will fire. So that's a quick overview of workflow rules. As you saw, setting them up is not the most intuitive process, but they were heavily used at one time They are still used in some situations where you need to send a web service call out. And now let's take a look at approval processes. So approval processes allow for all the same actions as workflows, but they serve a different purpose. With workflows, an event either happens or doesn't happen based on some defined condition. In approvals, a user might need to take manual action to make the approval happen, or records can move automatically through the process in some circumstances. Now, with workflows, you first had to set up actions and then set up workflow rules to use those actions. With approval processes, you might be able to just set up the process without any additional actions and just have approval actions, but you do have the option of including a small set of sub-actions. Let's look at an example of an approval process and when you would use it. Again, approval processes are for when records need to be approved before something happens to them. One use case might be that people need to review an opportunity before it gets finalized. Or in the case of giving a discount on a sale, a manager might need to approve a higher than expected discount. So again, let's go take a look at the org and see what this looks like. So now we'll go into setup and we'll type approval processes, and let's see what an approval process might look like. Now, for example, in this case, we're going to manage an approval process for opportunities. You'll see that here. And we have an approval process right now, but again, we forgot to activate it, so our users won't see a submit button on the record. Let's take a look at what's included in the approval process and what we can do with it. And we're going to edit the record, and we can edit different parts of the approval. So actually first, let's look at the record. So we added a description that 2 levels of approval are required for any opportunity over 100,000. And you'll notice here is that what happens on submission, and we have this action that the record gets locked, and we can specify who can make changes to the record when it's in this locked state. The other thing we have in approval processes, and this is what really makes them different from any other automation, is that we can have multiple approval steps. And you'll notice right now we have 2 steps indicated by step numbers, and 1 step is conditional and 1 step always happens. So let's look at the difference between them. In this case, we have an approval process, and we'll click next. And you'll notice that some records could skip this step. Or we could say that every single record should enter the step, or we say only go to this step if the following criteria are met. So in this case, if our opportunity amount is over $100,000, we want to go to this step. If the opportunity is under that amount, we're just automatically going to approve the record. But the record is not yet approved because that's only step 1. Then we have a step 2, and you'll notice there's no criteria listed there. That means every record has to come into step 2. And if we show the actions here, there are no additional actions needed. Let's look at the actions for the first step. Now, in this action, in addition to the record being submitted for approval, we've also added an email alert that goes out saying that there's an opportunity with an amount over $100,000. And from here, we can add additional actions. Again, it's the same set of actions that we have available on workflows, which is task, email alert, field update, and outbound message. Approval processes are very heavily used in orgs because, again, they are the checks and balances that organizations need in order to ensure that all records are meeting various standards in an organization. These approvals can also be invoked from Process Builder and flows, and so they work together with the newer automation tool to be able to let an org use its business processes. So in this video, we've covered workflows and we've covered approval processes. And once again, as we said, workflows are not used much anymore except for the cases of sending outbound messages. Approval processes are still very heavily used, most often in conjunction with flows and process builders. And this is Natalia Murphy